time for the meet and greet. Meet and greet. It's time for the meet and greet. Meet and greet. Proceed to the meet and greet.
So I think it's important when we are discussing a country or group of people to separate the people from the government. And I think politicians do that terribly. They fail to do it. So you have to separate the American people from the American government, the Russian people from the Russian government, the Chinese people from the Chinese Communist Party that's ruling in their government. So we can't take the government's actions of these countries and apply that and blame the people, because that's wrong. And, you know, I don't want to be blamed for what Congress is doing because I don't sit in Congress. And I wouldn't want anybody to blame a Chinese person for what the Chinese government is doing because they don't sit in the Chinese government. So I think we need to separate people from government. And while people make up government, people might not necessarily support or have the same values or same ideas that the government is doing. And they probably have their own opinion and they have their own views that should be taken for just that. And we have to look at the will of the people and not just the government actions just because that person happens to live in that country.
So we need to be secular and democratic.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And respectful.
Hello, viewers. How are you? So this is Asavari's Meeting Show 23. And I can't believe that we did 22 shows so successfully. And Aaron, I really indeed congratulate you for becoming the star speaker of Asavari's Meeting Show.
Thank you.
And you are so talented, you are charismatic, you are so presentable, and you are so much focused, disciplined, to the point. And you are such a great speaker. The first video that you did with us, I mean, it was such a great success that, you know, my friends and so many people from the audience, those who see our YouTube videos, they said that, why don't you offer this guy if he agrees to be the star speaker? I said, oh yes, of course. You know, if he has time for Asavari, then, you know, we can talk and discuss all these topics. So Aaron, I would really request you to kindly introduce yourself once again to our audience before we start the topics of our discussion.
Sure. So thank you again for having me. My name's Aaron Spring. I'm the youngest elected official in Westchester County on the Asavari School Board. However, I'm here as a private citizen with my own views. I am a law school student, a small business owner. I have a background and a degree in finance and accounting, as well as a love for community service and people in general. So it's my pleasure to be on the show and to dig into some of these topics. And I think it's a good balance. You know, with you being a Democrat, me being a Republican, we can show that we can have a thoughtful conversation and good conversation without getting divisive. So I appreciate you having me as your star speaker for the future series.
Exactly. It's indeed my great pleasure. And I really thank you for giving your valuable time to Asavari's Meeting Show. So today we have very sensitive topics of discussion. Now, the first topic, I have actually jotted down the points. I'm reading what I wrote. On January 6th, 2021, a mob of about 2,500 supporters of the US president, the then US president, Mr. Donald Trump, attacked the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. They sought to overturn his defeat in the 2020 presidential election by disrupting the joint session of Congress assembled to count electoral votes that would formalize President-elect Mr. Joe Biden's victory. The Capitol complex was locked down and the lawmakers and staff were evacuated as rioters assaulted law enforcement officers, vandalized property, and occupied the building for several hours. 5 people died either shortly before, during, or following the event. Many people were injured, including 138 police officers. 4 officers who responded to the attack died by suicide within 7 months. A week after the riot, the House of Representatives impeached Mr. Trump for incitement of insurrection, making him the only US president to have been impeached twice. So Aaron, I know that people say that we don't get along with each other because you hold Republican point of views and I'm Democrat, but you know what? I mean, humanity is above all. That's what I believe. And also, no matter which parties we follow, we are citizens of the United States of America. So in your opinion, who is the actual ghost behind the entire turmoil? It's a big shame for the Republican Party and our nation.
Well, absolutely. And I think no matter Democrat or Republican, you have to love and respect the Constitution and the constitutional principles that are taken when an election takes place and are followed rather when an election takes place. And to disrupt those constitutional principles with violence and with just a mob scene is despicable. It's absolutely despicable. And whether you win an election or lose an election, you have to respect the other side. You have to respect the results of the election, the will of the people. We're a democracy. Let's remember, demos comes from the Greek word for people. So to be a democracy, you have to respect the will of the people, and you have to respect the Constitution that put this in place. And there is no room for political violence on either side of the table. Now, in terms of who's the ghost, that's an interesting question, because if you look at the New York Times, CBS, and a few of the Frontline as well, and a few other major media sources, they did a lot of extensive research and background into who's the ghost. In my opinion, it's these radical groups, I'm going to call them, such as the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys, because if you look pre-January 6th, the weeks going into January 6th, they were using these apps such as Telegram, and they were sending coded voice messages as well as uncoded straight out in the open saying, we are going to riot, we are going to mob, we are going to cause havoc and turmoil in the Capitol and stop the steal, whatever that means. So in my opinion, this was a small group of radicals who took weeks ahead of time. In fact, some of them, about a dozen of them, got indicted yesterday for sedition. And the name of the leader of the Oath Keepers was, I'm drawing a blank here, but he was indicted and he was actually arrested yesterday. And Stuart Rhodes, that's his name. He was the founder and leader. He was indicted and arrested. And I believe he was behind a lot of this. And I don't have proof of that, but the proof will come out during a trial. So I think these extremist groups used people's fear. They used people's uncertainty, because there was all the stokes of fear were ignited. And 1 million people believed that this election was stolen, to the point that they gathered in the Capitol. Now, those that gathered to protest, I don't agree with what they were protesting, but if they did it peacefully, I guess I respect it. I don't agree with the concept at hand of a stolen election.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but do you think it's a conspiracy?
That the election was stolen? I do, because I have yet to see any substantial proof that shows how this election was stolen. Now, there's evidence out of Detroit and Atlanta and a few other places that, some dead people voted or a dead person cast a ballot. But how many votes is that? We don't know. So I do think it's a conspiracy. I think there was some fraud. I think there's some fraud in every election for both parties. I think there's people who vote that shouldn't be voting. Again, there was one case out of Detroit where a 130-year-old person voted. But did this happen on a large scale to the tune of millions of people? I see no evidence of that.
No,
I have yet to see any proof. So I would say, I would call this a conspiracy. I really would. And people fed into that. They then fed into people's fear and essentially had mob rule. They had 1 million people there. And it's very easy when you have 1 million people to get a few people agitated to the point that they're going to commit crime or commit, some sort of armed insurrection. When you look at the Black Lives Matter protests, those were mostly peaceful, but you had a few people that were burning and looting that caused $2 billion worth of property damage. But 99% of the people were peaceful. Same with this. I would say 99% of the people thought that this was a good cause, but then you had that 1%, those 2,500 criminals who essentially staged an insurrection. So I blame the leaders of these groups these
Mhm.
extremist groups. I blame the media because the media definitely stoked the flames here. And I blame anybody who was pushing this conspiracy and these ideas without any substantial proof. There was not a single court case that showed proof of fraud on a massive scale. And again, there are small examples of fraud with either a dead person voted or somebody voted by mail and voted in person. But I have yet to see any proof of millions and millions of votes being stolen. And I don't think it's fair to assume without any facts.
Right. Now, I have another question in my mind. The thing is that, why would you think that Mr. Trump will air his dirty laundry and embarrass himself publicly and globally?
So I think Trump has probably the biggest ego out of any American president. And I say that I'm laughing about it. I really shouldn't be laughing about it. But I don't think he truly believes that he lost the election. And I think he was going to do everything possible to
I mean, he kind
overturn
of
it.
defamed himself, right? I mean, more
Yeah,
than political party, he defamed himself.
I would agree with that. And I think it's important to note, yes, he lost the election, but it was such a close election. I mean, look at some of these
Yeah,
states. Wisconsin was
exactly.
20,000 votes.
Mhm.
Pennsylvania's 100,000 votes. Arizona's 11,000 votes. So to me, if I were him and I lost by those small margins, I would say, all right, I lost. Joe Biden, you're the president. Let's transition peacefully. I'll see you in 4 years. That's what I would have done because,
Exactly.
it's such a small
That's the
margin.
sportsman spirit, man.
Absolutely. So I think these radicals and these extremists who decided it was a good idea, and mind you, these are people who always say blue lives matter, the cops are greatest, but they attack police. So those 2,500 people, obviously criminals, should not be allowed to be taken seriously in politics and should really be blacklisted from political activity
Mhm.
because they have further divided us. They have sown the seeds of division throughout the country, and you're still seeing that today. That people have bought into this. People don't think what happened was wrong, and they're almost defending it, and that's pretty scary.
Unbelievable. This is completely unbelievable in the history of the United States of America. I mean, your party is such a great party because you had several great presidents. So let's talk a little bit about Mr. Abraham Lincoln. He was an American lawyer and statesman who served as the 16th president of the United States from 1861 until his assassination in 1865. Lincoln led the nation through the American Civil War and succeeded in preserving the Union, abolishing slavery, bolstering the federal government, and modernizing the US economy. He engineered the end to slavery with his Emancipation Proclamation, including his order that the Army and Navy liberate, protect, and recruit former slaves. He also encouraged border states to outlaw slavery and promoted the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which outlawed slavery across the country. On April 14th, 1865, just days after the war's end at Appomattox, he was attending a play at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. with his wife, Mary, when he was fatally shot by the Confederate sympathizer, John Wilkes Booth. Lincoln is remembered as a martyr and hero of the United States and is often ranked as the greatest president in the American history. So my question to you is that are we really following the legacy of Mr. Lincoln? He is such a great hero of all time. I mean, I'm a staunch Democrat and I love him so much. I have so much of respect. I follow his principle, his ideology, his legacy, and also his agenda, his discipline, of course, his equality, his harmony, his Emancipation Proclamation, So Republican Party, is it really following the legacy of Mr. Lincoln?
Well, I would argue that we as Americans, the first thing with his legacy, we're not following at all is we're not taking any time to process. And what I mean by that is we jump to conclusions, we move so quickly, we are ready to attack each other. When Lincoln wrote the Emancipation Proclamation, it took him 2 weeks to write it because he would write a paragraph. Then he would look out the window at the flowers in the garden. Then he would go for a walk. Then he would go write another paragraph. Then he would ask his generals or his advisors, what do you think of this? Then he would go and revise it. Then he would go revise it again. So it took him 2 weeks to write this short document. Why? Because he didn't jump to conclusions. He thought. He had this critical thinking process that we don't have today. That as soon as something goes up, we're quick to answer. We are quick to attack. We are quick to jump to conclusions, quick to go after the other side. He took his time, and he took his time well. And he recognized that I don't have all the answers today, but if I take the next 2 weeks and I write this and I revise it and I talk to my advisors, I don't have all the answers. That's how you do it. So I think we've lost that. I think we need to go back to one, looking at other people and asking for their advice and their opinion. And two, taking our time. You know, we don't need to jump to conclusions with policy and law. We can go slowly. We can and work with each other and revise and edit and revise and edit and keep going. So I think we've lost that. Two, I think we've lost the legacy of, you know, we fail sometimes in life and we just give up. Lincoln was not one of those people. Do you know Lincoln lost 11 elections before he was ever elected? He had 2 businesses fail. He suffered a mental breakdown, and he still ran for Senate in, I believe it was 1858, and he won. Imagine if he quit after that first loss. So I think we are so quick today, and just not only on a political level, on every level. The second we fail at something, we're like, ah, well, we tried, it's done, we can't do it again. Lincoln proved that you can fail time and time again, fall flat on your face, get up, persevere, and become president of the United States.
So two things I learned from you. One is patience, and number 2 is discipline.
Absolutely. And we don't recognize the strain, the stress that President Lincoln was under. Let's remember in 1864, when President Lincoln was running for re-election, obviously the Confederacy couldn't vote because they considered themselves a separate nation. They weren't voting on our election, but there was a presidential opponent in 1864. Lincoln beat him 2.2 million to 1.8 million. So 55% to 44%. But that means, so he was fighting the South, the southern part of the nation had wanted nothing to do with him. They were rebelling. And then half of your own North votes against you. So what do you have? The support of 25% of the country or so, and you're still going strong. You're still trying to unite us. You're still trying to push that we're one nation under God. So people don't realize that. Everybody thinks it was North versus South. It was North versus South, but within the North, it was the Democrats versus the Republicans. It was pro-union people in Kentucky and some of these border states that didn't want to leave the Union, but were pro-slavery, that hated Lincoln. It was there was all these different factions. So he wasn't just trying to hold the country together. He was trying to hold his own Northern coalition together. He was trying to hold his own party together, who think some radicals in the Republican Party believed he wasn't moving quick enough on emancipation, and they wanted to put up a candidate against him. So this man had to face a divided country, divided party, divided North, a divided Congress, and he still got it done. So we don't look at that. We look at the basic North versus South. There were so many other things going on, and Lincoln was able to win every single battle he fought, hold this country together, win his re-election, and get us back as one.
And the most difficult part and emotional part of this Lincoln assassination thing is that Booth was an actor, a stage actor. So being an artist, I'm also an actress, I'm in entertainment, and artists are usually very liberal, very understanding, very creative. So how can a creative man become a criminal, and that also a criminal of Mr. Lincoln? It's unbelievable. I just simply refuse to believe this.
Well,
So,
it's
mhm,
pure evil. It really was. Once Lincoln freed the slaves and the war ended, the entire Southern economy shifted and changed. And you now had 4 million people who were formerly enslaved that were now freedmen.
mm,
And people, especially people on a very low socioeconomic class, could not accept the fact that they were now equal to freedmen, that freedmen had the same rights as them. Because before the war, they were poor, they didn't have anything, they had no land, but at least they weren't slaves. That was the logic of some of these people. Now they're poor, they have no land, but former slaves have the same rights as them. They couldn't fathom that. They couldn't accept that. So it drove them to radicalism. It drove them to commit an act such as John Wilkes Booth assassinating the president. It led former soldiers to starting in Pulaski, Tennessee, the Ku Klux Klan to try
mhm.
to keep Black Americans down. So there was this whole notion that our way of life, that's how they thought of it, is done. There's no reviving this. We have to take radical steps. And we saw that in the aftermath, whether it was Reconstruction, Black codes, whether it was Jim Crow, people took radical steps because they could not accept the reality that humanity had changed, the economy had changed, and their way of life was never coming back.
Right. So we are going to further discuss about Emancipation Proclamation when we talk next month about the Black Lives Matter, because it's the Black History Month, I believe, right? February.
Yep.
Yes. So now, oh my God, we are going to talk about two very different, difficult, and intense topics. Okay. So the first one of our topic 3 is about the red dragon. Okay. China.
Mhm.
Currently, the United States and China have mutual political, economic, and security interests, such as the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons, but there are unresolved concerns relating to the role of democracy in government in China and human rights in China. Taiwan, trade, tech, and a hegemonic rivalry in the Asia Pacific, it's overall a tensed era in the US-China ties. So why is US trying to protect Taiwan when China doesn't want that? China has even claimed that there will be an Armageddon if US doesn't stop interfering in the matters of China, but at the same time, China wants peaceful and stable relation. So what is the red dragon trying to prove? Although Jinping and Biden, they had a virtual meeting on several topics, including Taiwan.
So I think there's some background to go into, as well as some future to go into, or future topics. One is China knows they're on borrowed time, and what I mean by that is they're expected to lose about half their population by 2050. Not because of some sort of like Armageddon or anything crazy like that, but simply because of demographic decline. When you have a one-child policy that has since changed, you started with 4 grandparents who then had 2 children, who then had 1 grandchild. So you went from 4 to 2 to 1 in 2 generations. So they're expected to lose half their population. When you lose half your population, productivity goes down, innovation goes down, your GDP goes down, your economic output goes down. So they know they're on borrowed time as a superpower. Do I think they're not going to be a superpower after 2050? No, but I don't think they're going to be as strong when their population literally halves in a matter of 30 years. So they're trying to make as many moves now to set themselves up to be the superpower for when that eventual demographic decline does come. Them expanding to a 2-child policy, it's too late at this point. You already had, again, in just 2 generations, you're going from 4 to 2 to 1. So that's going to hit them very soon, and they need to make up that ground. On a background level, I think a lot of the issues we're seeing with China and with foreign policy stem around Afghanistan. We had such a disastrous pullout from Afghanistan, and there's many people to blame. I'm not just going to blame Joe Biden or any party. I think there's a lot of other factors involved, but we showed the rest of the world that we don't necessarily have your back just because you had our back. And I think China's seeing that with Taiwan, and they're saying, well, the US says they're going to protect you. They said they've got your back. But look at Afghanistan. They didn't have their back. What makes you think they're going to have Taiwan's back? So I think that caused a lot of these issues. And I think in the last few years, whether it was currency manipulation, whether it was the theft of intellectual property, I think these have created some division between the US and China. I think the trade war that went on under the Trump presidency, hurting American farmers and us in turn hurting Chinese producers, that's created a major rift. So I don't see things getting much better, because under the previous administrations before Trump, the US was growing at a slower rate than China. China was beginning to catch up. But then under Trump, the US was growing at a faster pace than China. So China is still playing catch up to us, but they want to be number one. So I don't see them letting up until they are number one, but I also don't see them becoming number one. And because of that, you're going to have this constant back and forth. Who has the bigger gun per se, right? Who can be the better superpower and the bigger influencer? We're seeing $1 trillion investment in African countries by the Chinese to try to.
It's all about the muscle power. So do you think that there is any way that we can repair, touch up, or patch up the relationship with China?
I hate to say it, but no, I don't think so.
Not in the
And
near future?
no, I think we are way too at odds right now. I hate to say it. I'm an optimistic person, but the more that they make aggressive moves towards Taiwan, and the more that we also make aggressive moves in the South China Sea, and back, whether it was Australia or backing Japan in their recent comments, these things are not de-escalating. I don't think we're going to war. I knock on wood and I pray to God that we don't.
Oh, yes, yes.
But I don't see relations changing anytime soon. The history is just too dark in the last 20 years. Again, between currency manipulation, between trade wars, between the IP issues, between the Hong Kong protests a few years ago. I can't see us forgetting all that. I can't see them forgetting all the stuff we've done. And I think it's going to get worse in terms of diplomacy. And I pray that it does not end violently, but I don't see diplomatic relations being repaired anytime soon.
So nothing mutual can happen with China?
I just can't see it.
Given China so much of market. You see that every nook and corner we have Chinese cuisine, Chinese fast food, Chinese made in China stuff. So we have given them so much of market. And
but I think there's also a lot of human rights issues going on there, and we have not really cracked down on those. And we're doing business with a country or a government that is committing genocide, in my opinion, against the Uyghur Muslims, is constantly creating border issues with India as well. There's a lot of stuff going on there that the mainstream media really won't cover. And we're a big supporter of India, and I think as long as China continues to infringe there and infringe on the border, that's going to cause issues. I think the treatment of the Uyghur Muslims, like I said, the treatment of protesters in Hong Kong, these are major human rights issues. And while economics drives a lot of the stuff we do, I think people are going to start to put the human rights concerns first, and essentially tell China, we are not going to do business, or we are not going to continue to work with you unless the ruling party there starts to address some of the human rights concerns that we have. And they're not just concerns of America, they're concerns of the international community as well.
I see. So the second part of this discussion is Russia. Russia and the United States maintain globally significant and strategic foreign relations ties. Both nations have shared interests in nuclear safety and security, non-proliferation, counter-terrorism, and space exploration. The relationship was generally warm under the Russian President Boris Yeltsin from 1991 to 1999, until the NATO bombing of Yugoslavia in the spring of 1999, and has since deteriorated significantly. In 2014, relations greatly deteriorated further due to the Russia's annexation of Crimea, I don't know how to pronounce, and Russian military intervention in Ukraine. So many people from Ukraine and even Russians, they think that wars are always resolved by diplomacy. Now, the thing is, in my understanding, Russia doesn't want Ukraine to be a NATO ally or a member. So where do we stand? I mean, we are trying to protect Ukraine, and our relationship with Russia is not good. Right now, it is the bitterest, I would say. Many of us think that Russia is a thug country or a nation. So what do you think, Aaron?
So I think, again, when we look at what happened with Afghanistan, that really sent a message worldwide. And it gave a lot of these larger superpowers, especially our quote unquote rivals, free reign to do whatever they want, because we broke our word and we said we were going to do something and we didn't do it. So when that happens, it leaves our Eastern European allies, it leaves our Indo-Pacific allies questioning, well, if we don't have the US backing us, the Russians or the Chinese can move in at any time, and they're questioning our allegiance. And I don't blame them. Now, the Ukraine situation is a unique one because everybody was talking about, will Russia invade Ukraine? Is there going to be war? The war from 7 years ago or 8 years ago now hasn't ended. It's still going on. Almost 14,000 people have died in the last 8 years because Russian-backed separatists are still fighting with the Ukrainian government. So that war never ended. It's just now a matter of whether it's going to escalate, which I think it will. Now, we are doing all the wrong things in American government, in my opinion. There used to be unanimous support for sanctions on the Russian pipeline they're trying to build. Now, it seems as if we are going to support the new Russian pipeline and allow them to have even more leverage over the European Union when it comes to fuel. So with that, and with their recent movement into Kazakhstan, the other day, which was mostly peaceful protesters, a few criminals hijacked that and created very violent riots, and the Russians moved in and suppressed that very quickly. So the Russians essentially know they have free reign, whether it's in Georgia, Kazakhstan, Ukraine. I wouldn't be surprised if there's going to be threats against the Baltic states, against Lithuania, against Latvia, against Estonia. And our allies in Poland are very worried right now over what's going on there. So I think Russia is not as big of a threat as China, in my opinion, in the future, but or long term rather, but in the near term, Russia is definitely the bigger threat. And I would not be shocked if they continue to push into Ukraine. The election in the Crimea, that 75% of Crimean residents wanted to secede in 2014, and that's why they took it over. I don't buy that those were real results. I think there was a lot of voter suppression there. I think the Russian separatists and the pro-Russia forces there really pushed for that referendum to be such a landslide. And I don't see them backing down anytime soon. I think they want to recreate, I'm going to call it the Russian Empire.
So my question to you is that we have China on one side and Russia on the other side. We are kind of sandwiched between these two big powers, right? And right now, we are bogged into almost $29 trillion of debts and deficits because of the COVID, because of all these wars that we have been continuously, I would say we had to do it. So is there any kind of solution? Because we want our economy to be steady. We want to revive, restore, improve, and develop our economy. So if we are bogged into $28.9 trillion of debts and deficits, and on the top of that, if we kind of continue to be in a war, which means more expenses, right, to maintain the troop, and to maintain all the arms and ammunitions. Plus, we have so much of internal issues, internal problems. Okay, so can we come to any kind of mutual or any kind of like solution that, if not ally, but at least we can have like a good terms and we can negotiate with both China and Russia?
I believe that we can. It's also a matter of what do they want, right? And I think one of the biggest things we could do economically is manufacture more here and push what I'm going to call a new Monroe Doctrine, which would be a Southern America, South America, North America, and Central America essentially alliance when it comes to trade, when it comes to economics. And if we can manufacture more here, and we can do more to bump up the economies in South America, Central America, and North America, we'll rely less on Chinese goods. They'll have less leverage, and I think they'd be more willing to come to the table. Right now, our trade deficit with them sits at over $500 billion a year. That was the last figure. So it's very easy for them to have leverage over us because without them, we don't have a lot of these goods. So I think if you bring some of these services and goods back home, or at least into the this part of the hemisphere or this hemisphere, I think that alleviates some of the economic pressure that we're facing. And I think that would give us some more bargaining chips to bring to the table. And the other thing with those two countries is we need goodwill from them. And I get we're not innocent. We really aren't. We've had many issues in the past. We caused a lot of these issues in Europe and Asia, but there needs to be goodwill from both sides. I don't think Putin respects us. I don't think he respected Donald Trump. I don't think he respects Joe Biden. I don't think Xi respects either leader as well. So I think until you have governments in those countries that respect us, and for the record, our government needs to respect them too. I don't necessarily see that happening, but there could, if we bring some of that economic manufacturing back home, if we bring some of those services back home and we use some of that leverage against them, we can bring them to the table. But again, with China expanding into Africa now with all these investments, with Russia trying to expand their fuel pipeline, they're clearly taking these economic steps to put more pressure in the United States so that we don't have that leverage. We have to yank that economic leverage so that we can bring them to the table and address whether it's human rights issues, trade imbalances, suppression of speech in the Eastern European parts of that Russia is getting into. So I think optimistically we can come to the table with them, but it's going to take goodwill from both sides and both governments.
Because I am so much afraid of that Armageddon issue. So my concern is the Armageddon. I mean, China has done something, I mean, we have got the economic Armageddon, and we cannot really lose more jobs. The small businesses cannot suffer. And I know that it is a great proposal that you said that we can manufacture more goods, and so that we don't have to depend on Chinese market. But, the manufacturing costs, then labor cost, and all these issues, we have to consider, right? So
absolutely. But I think on a moral level, I'm willing to spend more for a product made in the United States, knowing that it created jobs here, that it was done under fair labor practices, that my environmental impact was not as bad because the goods were not shipped from the Pacific over here. They were made here. So that's going to be less of a carbon footprint. So I think we as Americans need to realize that, and we need to be willing to spend a little bit more. And I know it's tough. It's easy for me to say that living in a middle-class community here in Westchester County. I don't live under the poverty line, so it's easy for me to say that. And it's not as easy for somebody who's struggling or living paycheck to paycheck to say they're willing to pay a couple $dollars more for the same good.
Because Chinese food, Chinese goods, they are much inexpensive.
Yeah.
The people, those who are below the poverty line, they like it, they prefer it. Right.
True. But I think we need to look at, again, morality. And when some of these goods are being made by 12-year-old children who are not being paid well or compensated well, we have to take issue with that. And I'm not saying all Chinese goods are made by child labor or by unfair labor practices, but there's evidence that there is a significant portion of them that are being made by unfair labor practices and by child labor.
Because China is a huge population, and some of my Chinese friends, they always say that there is so much of demand of this kind of jobs, so it's not I mean, I don't know, I haven't been to China. Have you been to China?
No.
Just for sightseeing? No? But I wish to in China and in
I do want to go. I'd love to go
Yeah.
eventually. My next trip is to Brazil, but China's on the list.
Right, right,
But
right.
I think we need to take a moral stand, and we need to say, are we okay with jobs shipping out of this country? And are we okay with areas being depressed and dilapidated simply because we want a cheaper good? I personally am not okay with that. But again, I recognize my stance as a middle-class American that I can afford more expensive goods. But that option is not there for probably half of
Yeah,
this
if there
country.
is a cash flow, we can definitely make this mission successful. But there is some kind of the cash is not flowing. I mean, I see so many businesses, they went out of business. So many foreclosures have happened. And right now, the real estate market is very slow because
Mhm.
people, they have no money to make a down payment and to bear the closing expenses and to get a house or a condo. I mean, I see so many stores, they are open for lease and for rent. That means, there is no business. Right?
Absolutely. And interest rates are up. So, good luck securing a mortgage. That's now going to be more expensive, and it's going to
Oh,
cost you
yeah.
tens of thousands of more dollars on a 30-year mortgage
Mhm.
that just a year ago, if you were able to lock in under 3%, you were very lucky.
Mhm.
Now, good luck. It's not going to happen. So I think we definitely need to look at that. And you talked earlier about we need to look within. We have so many issues here. We're $30 trillion in debt. And I think we need to fix a lot of our own issues. And part
Yeah,
of
the
that is
internal
by
issues, the foremost difficulty and the most important issue is that we have given an idea to the world that, we don't get along with each other, like the Republican Party and the Democratic Party.
right.
So if we can work together, if we can prove that, of course, as one united nation, I mean, as per the name suggests, United States of America, but are we really united? We are kind of divided, right, in
Very
our
divided.
ideology and principle. So if we can really work on an united basis, then I'm pretty sure that, Aaron, when you become the governor or at least the mayor or maybe who knows, the commander-in-chief. Oh my God. And my job as a media personality, you said on air, it is confirmed. So, I mean, we will see all the meeting shows. You will keep coming every month to us, and I will show to the whole world that, we can definitely resolve our internal issues first, because charity begins at home. That is the principle that I can firmly believes in.
Absolutely.
We can begin the charity at home if we can mutually work together with a great understanding and love towards our nation. Then definitely we can conquer all the forces that are trying to defame our country.
Absolutely. And I think it's only a matter of time. I think while we had, whether it was urban riots in 2020 or January 6th insurrection, those were snapshots and that does not represent all of us. And I think it's important to note that when you turn off the media and you go and have a conversation with your neighbor who does not vote the same way as you, I guarantee you'll agree on 85% of the issues. And you might disagree on a couple other issues, but that's fine. You find a point that you might like, you find some common ground, and you might agree to disagree, but we are allowing the media to drive our narrative. We are allowing them to further divide us. And again, just talk to your neighbor. My cousin actually told me, he said, Just go talk to your neighbors that you don't agree with, and I guarantee you'll find something in common. And he's of a different political spectrum than I am, but we agree on many issues because we talk it out, and that's how it should be. And once we do that on a nationwide scale and talk it out and come together as one country, we'll be strong enough to resolve some of the world issues.
Right,
But
exactly.
you know, you can't draw from an empty well, right? And we are indeed an empty well in terms of mutual respect, in terms of coming together. And July 4th is 6 months away, and maybe this July 4th we should remember what this country is truly about.
Exactly. So what this country is truly about, that is a very good thing. And as per the closing statement, I want to say something, and I want you to say something also. And that thing is, I'm American, a North American. I belong to United States of America. I'm brought up in this country, and with a great due respect, I have a big respect for the national anthem. But there is a line, the bombs bursting in air, okay? So that is for joy, for celebration. And also, when we come as a winner, okay? But many countries, they think that we are bombers and droners. I mean, we have had differences in opinion with Japan, and we bombed them. Similarly, North Korea, and then we have droned several Middle Eastern countries, then Afghanistan. So, what would you say? We are not bombers and droners. I mean,
No,
we
I would
are
argue.
fun
I'd
people,
argue,
right?
right. And I'd argue, if anything, we are. I'm going to use the word saviors, because we need to look at history. And if it wasn't for us, for the American involvement in World War One, there's no telling what would have happened. If it wasn't for us getting involved in World War Two, there's, again, no telling what would have happened. So I urge the rest of the world to look at what we did in the two world wars to save the globe from dominance, from whether it was Imperial Germany at first to then Nazi Germany in the Second War. And while we've committed atrocities, while we did drop those atomic bombs, we have to also look at the projections that said we would have lost 1 million American troops had we invaded Japan, and millions of Japanese would have died as a result of an invasion of Japan. So while it is wrong to drop an atomic bomb, it was for, quote unquote, the greater good. Had we not done it, millions more lives would have been lost in an invasion of Japan because of the notion of the Japanese never surrendering. So I think the world needs to look at history. I think they need to look at circumstances, and I think they need to remember the good America that bailed out the world during World War I and II, and not necessarily base everything off of the last 30 years. With that being said, with the drone strikes, very opposed to that. I also don't seem to quite understand why we are fighting for countries, or in countries, that the people of the countries won't fight for themselves. Why are we getting involved in conflicts when we aren't wanted there, and when there are forces in those countries that they don't want to fight for what they believe in? So that's kind of crazy to me as well. But just to end it again, I think we need to look at the good that the American people and the American government has done, and try to steer. We need to also steer the narrative away. We need to create goodwill within the globe,
Exactly.
and we need to look to our African allies, our Asian allies, our South American allies, our European allies, and to our enemies. We need to sit down at the table with them, and try to work with them to find out, how do we live in harmony and peace. Because there's no point in having a parlay with your ally. They're your ally. You have a parlay with your enemies for a reason, because they're your enemy, and you have to try to come to a conclusion that does not cause massive death or massive disruption. And that doesn't mean we have to necessarily like each other, the Russians and the Americans, or the Chinese and the Americans, but it does mean we have to live in peace and harmony and try to do that as best we can. So
exactly. I want us, means Republican and Democrats, to unite together, and us means United States, to
yes,
make America great again.
there
And
you go.
in the Lincoln way,
I like it.
Mr.
That's gonna be
Lincoln.
your slogan for 2032. I like it. Very nice. So I agree with you. I think we need to get back to that. And we need to stop this division. It's really destroying this country, destroying families. It's destroying America as we know it. And we need to stop living in a bubble and go have conversations that might not be comfortable, but they're good for progress. So that's kind of my closing message: is be comfortable with being uncomfortable, because that's the only
Exactly.
way that's the only way you're going to grow as a person.
We can resolve anything and everything by diplomacy,
Oh, absolutely. I agree.
right?
Absolutely. So,
Yeah. Great.
all right.
Thank you so much, Aaron. I really appreciate your kindness and generosity, and also your views, your agenda, your principle. And you are the one who have studied history, and you also have a very good and fair knowledge about the current affairs. And you have been always talking on facts, not on fiction.
Thank
And
you.
you don't like any hypothesis. You like to talk on reality, which I really appreciate, which Asavari appreciates, everybody will appreciate, the whole nation will appreciate, and we will continue our discussion, and I will see you again next month.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. I love this. Is great. This really is great.
Sure.
So,
Mhm.
thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Nice to see